Lucio Fulci's Gates of Hell trilogy peaked in 1981 with the second installment. The Beyond hits all the right notes in terms of the atmosphere, visceral horror, and the absurd. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, much like my rewatching of City of the Living Dead, The Beyond was a lot better than I remembered it. Uh, this is a very fantastic film. I tend to have a pretty clear hierarchy in my mind of Fulci's best films, which is Don't Torture a Duckling by a mile, greatest film of all time. And then, a bunch of other films, Zombie Flesh Eaters being probably his most important one, in terms of like his broader recognition and I guess as a formative experience in his second wave or second coming, if you like. I think he'd done some more classy things, if you like, earlier in his career, and then it was very much cash in on what was popular at the time with Zombie Flesh Eaters. But as I said in the last podcast, this is the that was the godfather of this Gates of Hell trilogy, with that being part of it. This is the best of these three films by a distance. I think what I hadn't appreciated in the past about The Beyond, even having watched it a number of times, was that there's actually quite a lot of order amongst the chaos. And it's sort of, all these three films go together, clearly. Catriona MacColl's in all of them. They all have this sort of vague relationship with the concept of a gate of hell. I believe in this film they mention the 7 gates of hell, which makes me wonder, was there a plan to do a 7-parter, which would have been incredible. But the sort of absurd, silly logic that happens, there's a certain coherence to it in this film that suggests that more work went into it, and I think a slightly better script. It's still the plot and the premise of the film is still simply a vehicle for certain scenes of horror. And while there were some really difficult pieces of gore to look at in City of the Living Dead, I think it's fair to say that at least one scene in particular probably takes that to another level in terms of a memorable moment of visceral horror. But what I like most about this film is the effective building of tension. I think it's difficult to build the sense that the stakes are rising all the time, whilst also subsidizing, if you like, the earlier stages of a film with moments of horror. And I'm sure I'll make more mention of it as I move through the plot, but I've seen in the past, I can't remember if it was factual or simply speculated, but nonetheless the observation was right, that it feels towards the end like there are zombies added because in certain markets it's like, well, Fulci's the zombie guy, so we need zombies. And I suspect that that's true, but having watched it this time, I realize I think it works anyway because it adds to the rising sense that the gates of hell are opened. Like in the early stages of the film, you get more, well, not subtle, but lower scale horror, less people dying, less horrible things happening. And it seems to stand to reason that if the gates of hell have been opened and things are beginning to go to shit, that they're going to, at some point, they're going to sort of reach a reach a peak, and it's like everything is just falling apart now. We've had subtle horror, and now it's so bad that people are rising from the dead. And yes, they're zombies, but you know, it's interesting to have this three-part series that is clearly only able to be made in lieu of the success of a genuine zombie movie by Fulci. But they're almost zombie adjacent films. Like the zombie, it goes beyond the zombie stuff, and whilst obviously zombies are dead people that are walking again, they feel the zombies in this film are mainly, or the majority of them are patients that were in the hospital, and that has there's a certain specificity to that, I think. So anyway, let's get into the plot. And as I mentioned, there are some wonderful moments in this film, and I think the term sepia tone. So we're back in Louisiana in 1927, and to be honest, this is another one of those moments that I mentioned on the previous podcast that I think almost accidental uncanniness that Fulci was able to put together when he was trying to depict American places, because he comes at it with an Italian perspective and also without the budget or the wherewithal probably from the entire crew to make it authentic. And I always get the impression he was trying to make it authentic. And this isn't bad. I think the sepia tone helps because it's, I sort of like the image of the American South in the 1920s. I don't mean obviously the racism, but just sort of smaller areas, the kind of places that you might see alligators, like the guys in the boats. It's a real atmosphere, and the music in this scene is magnificent. But it isn't quite Louisiana, even if it's shot there, which, as far as I'm aware, it's not. It isn't quite authentic. Part of that is the acting. Part of that is the sense that, like, you put the sepia tone to give the sense of it having happened a while ago. But even now, watching it in 2023, and the film is, it's been nearly as long since the film, 42 years as the 54 years that it was. The gap between the film and the time that they're depicting. But even with the film being particularly old, there's still this sense of modernity, and like, I don't know if it would have been pertinent to add a bit of what's that term? The dots all over the screen. Anyway, nonetheless, there's the guy in the hotel. He's sitting there, and they all rush in, and his eyes are just going all over the place. But maybe actually a little bit of anti-racism there from Fulci to have a black guy with I guess would be a reasonable job at the time in Louisiana, sort of the front guy at the hotel. But that's that's an interesting thing. So there's these two boats of people that they're moving across this river. As I say, atmosphere in this scene is very, very good. And we've got this blonde woman and another man, or a man known as Schweik, he's doing a painting. And again, I think this is where this film is the strongest. Like, there is a certain coherence to the narrative. Obviously, the circular nature of, we have the painting that he's doing, and then art imitates life, and then life imitates art. Bullshit of our two main characters end up in the painting as such, or are we to understand like that? This is his intention. I think something worth noting probably that I haven't really thought of in this depth before is Shrike like a devil or demon figure, or is he made that by getting murdered? Because not to judge a book by its cover, but he does seem fine. Like he's painting a pretty ominous painting. This vast landscape. I guess it's purgatory, and people just lying there, all dead probably. Um, but like, is it the fact that he gets murdered that changed it over? Because the building tension of the music gives the impression that something bad is happening, and but anyway, I guess I better explain the scene. So the guys, they walk up the stairs, and Schweik, he's scared. You know, they break into his room, and then they pick up this goo stuff that I guess is acid or something. It really just looks um that like sort of paper mache type stuff, and let's be honest, it probably is that kind of thing. Um, and they grab him and they like nail his hands to the wall, and it's very, you know, Jesus getting crucified imagery, which has probably been done to death far too many times in films in general. But Fulci, he did it from time to time. Um, but like, so then they nail him there, and then they just they have this. There's like a big barrel of this. I guess we'll call it acid. Now, I can't remember if they carry it upstairs. In fact, I don't think they do. So are we to understand that there's just this barrel of acid just sitting in Schweik's room with him, just waiting for someone to come and throw it on his face? So they have bowls, and they're picking it up, and they're just hurling it at his face. Um, and there's a moment, I think it's when the second guy does it, that you can see there's not a great amount of care. So like, you know, they've got it in their bowls, and they're like, you know, pushing it forward with like momentum, so it's going to fly out of the bowl onto the face. And definitely one of the guys doesn't seem to be taking a hell of a lot of care for his thumb, um, and probably a couple of fingers as he does it. I think if this stuff literally melts the guy's face, and you're using it specifically for that purpose, so you would think that you would try to not get it on yourself. But obviously, this scene isn't about that. And so there's a lengthy scene of sort of seeing it on his face and him melting, and there's very much a sort of dummy version of him, until, you know, he moves from his normal man face to the sort of zombie-ish face that he has as the movie goes on. Now, as I said, the music's very, it's like do 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 do, yeah, that music that we get. Good music, but it's an indication that like things are getting worse, and for this guy, they're just getting done. So I guess my point there is, I think the film's trying to evoke the sense that this is causing something to happen, as opposed to this is something happening. Now, the issue in terms of interpreting its direct meaning from a plot perspective is they come up and say, "You ungodly warlock," and he's, you know, doing the painting. The music, the something is happening music, indicates perhaps that this wasn't a good idea. So, do the gates of hell open because they killed him, or do the gates of hell open because he is doing the painting and because he is an ungodly warlock? Anyway, I won't dwell on that any further. It's a good scene though. Is a point, and this is one of those moments that I was talking about earlier of like subsidizing the horror, as the film sort of steadily reaches its zenith. And it's really good. Like, you know, generally speaking, the Fulcis, the Argentos, the Italian horror people, were not shy about having a pretty excessive opening scene, shall we say. So let's just get a couple of character names here. Liza, that's right. There's Liza, that's Katrina McCall. There's John McCabe, Dr. John McCabe. David Warbeck is what I'll probably just call him. There's Emily, played by Cynthia Monreal. And who's the... I'm just going to call him the real estate dude. I think he's a real estate dude who ends up getting eaten by the spiders. One of the most unfair one of the most unfair deaths in movie history. It actually reminds me a little bit of the lawyer from Jurassic Park, where like it's almost an in joke that he gets one of the worst deaths because he's an annoying lawyer. Um, I feel like they could have made this dude a bit more like that. Whereas, like, because his job, his role in the movie seems to be like saying, talking about the hotel with Liza and trying to get her to do things with it. But he's not even being pushy. Like, I think he gives her a call at one point or tells her like, "Oh, you can do a bathroom in the dining and blah blah blah." But it's like he's not even being a jerk about it, and he's just super polite. And I think it just feels like I guess I'll put this. There's a few characters in this film. Why does this totally redundant character get one of the greatest deaths or awful deaths in movie history? It's just so over the top. Um. Anyway, so after this extreme opening, it's like we calm down a lot, right? We've got Liza and the real estate dude, and they're just sort of walking around. Or they might be inside, but his role is just to walk around and talk to Catriona McCall and then Lucio Fulci just before he dies. And they're talking about the hotel, and so they come out into they're outside, and there's a couple of people doing some kind of work to the window, and they're on like a big platform, and one of the guys sees who turns out to be Emily. She's on the inside, and he sees her, and he falls off, and it feels like he dies, but because there's like blood coming out of his mouth, which seems to be the movie "Hey, They're Dying." But anyway, then we cut to the next scene. He's lying on the couch, and there's Catriona McCall and the real estate dude, and then David Warbeck comes in, and he's a doctor. And he opens his eyes, like he pulls them open, and I think we can see that his eyes are now all blind, and I guess that's just like Emily. So I guess that's the sort of show that you've seen horror and you're in hell or you're in purgatory or whatever. And he goes, "This man needs to get to a hospital." It's like he fell off this fucking platform that was about 15 meters in the air so badly that blood just came out of his mouth. We thought he was dead, and it's like he needs to get to a hospital. Like, good thing we've got a doctor here to make such assessments. But see, this is the beginning of I think a very, very well executed film where there's moments in City of the Living Dead and probably House by the Cemetery that we'll talk about next month, where it's funny, but it's not clear if it's meant to be funny. The Beyond is just, it's put together more effectively than those films in that way. Like, it's so funny. And like there's a certain self-awareness to the way David Warbeck plays this role. My understanding is it was in quite a lot of these exploitation films. And like he's a very good looking man, and it seems like he knew it. And like he carries himself with an air of like there's an ironic "I'm a serious movie star" kind of vibe to him. And geez, does it work? Like he does it so well. So then we see the Joe's Plumbing Man show up, and this is one of those like attempts to be American thing that they're doing. It's like, oh yeah, Joe the plumber. He shows up in his truck, and he's He's got a New Orleans accent. I'll sure make a mention of Katrina McCall's unbelievable New Orleans accent um, as we go along. Um, Wait, is it New Orleans? They say, I'm sure they say Louisiana. Anyway, fuck my geography, but I'm pretty sure I'm remembering all that correctly. But anyway, Southern American accent. Um, and so he has some serious plumbing to do. And I've watched this scene. I'm certainly not a plumber, but I watched this scene, and I'm sort of like, what's he, what's he fucking doing? So like, there's this sense that it's a basement, and it's like completely covered in water. Like in places, it's like, um, oh yeah, it is New Orleans because I've heard all these mock criticisms of it being there are no basements in New Orleans because it's at sea level. That's right. And it's so on the nose that there are basements in New Orleans in this film that it makes me feel like it wasn't necessarily poor research so much as it was again adding to the humor. So there is basically a whole ocean um, in this basement. And there's just shit everywhere, but it's so bad to the point that, like, okay, I don't think it's just a couple of little plumbing leaks that led this to happen. I feel like there's entire fucking walls missing here. And we see a number of scenes with Joe the plumber sort of wandering around, um, and you know, I guess he's getting to the bottom of where the issues are, but it doesn't look like he's got any plan. So I'm not sure he's an amazing plumber, but anyway, so she asks how long it's going to take. Like she's quite impatient. Obviously, she wants to get a hotel up and running, which is an element of the story that they never overly emphasize. Um, and he's just like, it'll take as long as it takes, and it's like, all right, but as much as there's a sense of like, oh, this is going to take a while, it seems like it's going to take years. So anyway, I'm a little bit torn on this section, this brief little few minute section where we're sort of cutting in between Joe and other things that are happening. Because it's sort of, I guess it's building tension because we sense that Joe is not a big player in this film. He's just a plumber. Which makes him expedient, which means that we're likely to see him die, which is really sort of the purpose of these extra characters. But because there's a sort of quite a lack of music going on in this scene as we keep cutting back towards it, it doesn't, and we don't have those indicative of horror things about to happen, sort of camera angles until one does happen. It's not so much that it's not necessarily building tension. So maybe it's a slightly missed opportunity, but nonetheless, when it does happen, it's quite a good jump scare. Not just because it comes out of nowhere, the hand coming through the gap that grabs his face, but because it's a hand that's sort of reaching towards us, it actually is quite visceral. And yeah, it is one that's going to make you jump, but clearly, I'm not a massive fan of jump scares. One, because they fucking suck if you're susceptible to them like I am. But two, because it's if you're trying to create a scary experience for the viewer, it's the cheapest way of doing it. But because it doesn't come with such a significant sound element to it, it's like it's the way the scare itself is constructed, and then there's a lot of eye stuff going on in this film. That sort of concept that you've seen these horrific things, so you need to be punished for it. It's just excessive. The hand just reaches into his face and rips his eyes out. really to do justice to it. You'd have to watch it yourself, which I highly, highly recommend. Um, so one of the advantages I think of this film, again that ambiguity between like, is the absurdity deliberate, or um, is it just accidental? The uncanny, should I say? Um, is that it means that you can have these scenes that seem like they're incomplete, or like that they weren't putting much effort into them, which might be true, but they end up falling into the structure, or the feel, should I say, of the film particularly well. So we've got Arthur and Martha. um, Martha is just like a not very nice person, it seems, and Arthur is a very creepy person. I don't know if they ever interact with each other, which is quite funny. They're sort of like the like, I don't know, assistants at the at the hotel or whatever. And Martha is in Inferno, I believe. I can't think of the actress's name. So, but she's good. She's just got a face that you can very easily do a bit of work with her hair, and suddenly she looks very, very creepy. So she's well cast in this role. Um, and I think our introduction to uh, Arthur is him like skulking around uh, Liza's room, but specifically what seems to be her underwear drawer. And she's angry. He's like, I was looking for the key, or whatever, and she's just sort of looking at him sternly. Now, the implication, like, she's, what are you doing in here? What are you doing in here? She, with a weird accent. She is quite annoyed at him. And she says later in the film, like, that Arthur and Martha just came with the hotel, which is very, very funny. But like, what? Why is? What, can't she fire him? Like, he doesn't seem to do much good. He's like really at all. And she just, now he's skulking around to underwear drawer, and she's like, she's annoyed, but we'll just get fucking rid of him. You didn't hire him in the first place. But again, it all just adds to the to the feel of it all, I guess. Yeah. I didn't realize this. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. I didn't realize this scene happened so early, but this is another thing that really adds beautifully to Martha. Is soon after this scene, she then goes down, I think, to look for Joe in the basement, and she sees him. And this is a great fucking shot. She's like, I always thought that he was dead, but I actually was a bit more focused. Dead as in not moving, but I think he's basically in zombie mode. And anyway, she sees that he's all eyeless, and he seems to go like breathing out or being a bit of a zombie, and he's fallen away. And she just looks at this very factually, or with an almost, this is happening again look, as if she's aware that this is the kind of thing happens, but she's not scared at all. And then she sees Schweik like rising out of the water, and then she's terrified. And it's so funny because it's like, the only possible way that she would look at Joe the plumber in the state that he's in and not be terrified is if this was something that she was aware happens, and also that she doesn't really care. But given that would require knowledge of the building and stuff, like, she would have to know who Schweik is, and therefore she would know Schweik is back. The only way she could possibly not care about this. But then when she sees Schweik, she's terrified. So are we to believe that this is just some person that walks around here and like she sees a plumber who's just had his eyes ripped out and he's sort of groaning like a zombie? That she just, well, that's just par for the course. I don't know. Either way, it's great. So, it's sort of a funny pace, this film, right? Because we just have these. You can tell that Fulci wanted to be a little bit ponderous with these films. Like I don't think he didn't particularly like overly fast paced films, which is quite funny when you're making films about Gates of Hell. And there should be a sense of urgency, like in The City of the Living Dead, as I mentioned in that podcast. That like they really need to get this shit done before All Saints Day starts, and then there's that scene with Catriona McCall, um, and and the dude in that, where she's like, "Look, I don't want to think about this right now. We just need to go get some food," which is very very funny. This film, the sense of urgency isn't amongst the characters. Is like the lack of it is more sensical because there are bad things happening, but it's not like the people that know it are people that aren't necessarily going to do anything about it, like Emily. Um, so we have this sort of contrast between an unfolding narrative that is pretty thin. The narrative is the gates of hell are opening, and Liza is opening a hotel, and there's a doctor there. That's really the entire narrative. So Al Cliver or Al Cleaver is there. The blonde guy from Zombie Flesh Eaters. He's a doctor. He's a colleague of David Warbeck, and again, there are moments in these films where like ridiculous things are happening, but they're being treated in a way by the characters that they're not ridiculous. So he's hooked up this brainwave thing to Schweik, who, from what it would seem, is has been dead for many many years. But like he hooks that up, and we can actually quite clearly see the actor's eyes moving, which I don't think is meant to be the case because one, it's too blatant. Two, it's so blatant that Al Cliver would have actually seen them because he was looking near his face. And three, the moment where we see the brainwave when Al Cliver leaves the room would not have the same impact if we already knew that he was alive. The other thing about it though is like it's sort of like, oh my goodness, this is a brainwave in this dead creature. Yeah, why was he hooking the machine up to him anyway? Surely was he? I mean, the only reason you would do that is to look. But it's like his face is all melted, for fuck's sake, guys. Anyway, there's then that lengthy scene with, I guess, Joe's wife, and we see the do not entry sign, which is just perfect. Joe's wife and daughter who are at the hospital, and the daughter could be anywhere between 12 years old and like 39 years old. It's very, very unclear to me how old that girl is. I suppose she's meant to be a teenager. Anyway, the mum goes in and like no one seems to let her in, but she's like putting a suit on Joe, right next to Schweik, and like I don't think this is how this works. When you dress your loved one for their burial, there's just other, frankly, zombie-esque bodies right next to them. So she does that, and this scene goes on for way, way too long. Because, although, again, it's the build-up thing. Now, I remember just before shit starts going down, she screams really loud. And I can't remember what makes her scream or if it is anything in particular. But she screams, the whole scene, it feels like she's about to look behind her and see Schweik, because that would be pretty scary. It's just that he's right there, so she couldn't have not noticed him when she came in. Anyway, she sort of looks around and then she screams, and then she's lying on the ground. So just keep in mind that she was just standing up, uh, she was the only supposedly alive person in the room, but then, of course, the strikes brainwaves. And she screams, and then we get this excellent sound effects and music. And now she's just lying down with her eyes closed uh, next to a cabinet with, I guess, some more acid. Not like the not like the paper mache acid from the first scene, but like more watery acid. And she's lying there, and it's just falling on her face, like it's falling on her face. Now, this is where this film fucking owns what it is. Um, the horrible, unexpected thing happens, and then we're like, "Wow, this is bad," and then it goes, "No, no, no, you don't, you don't know the half of it." So at some point within all this, the little girl walks in, the possibly 40-year-old little girl, and she sees her mum. In fact, when she hears the scream, she yells out "Mummy," and then she goes in. So I think she sees the acid falling on her mum's face, and so it's hard enough to watch, right? And her face is melting and shit, and you're watching it for a while. Again, it reminds me a little bit of the a couple of the deaths in New York Ripper, where it's shot in a way that, like, oh, that there's the action. We understand what a horror scene is. You've got the point. You've seen a bit of horror. We move on. But it does that, and then the horror starts. So we're seeing all the stuff fall on her face, and that's fine. And we think, okay, well, she's dead. But then we see it continue to fall on her face, and then, like, her face sort of seems to start exploding, like little explosions of blood and presumably brain and bone just exploding. And it's like, wow, this is extraordinary. Like, this is they're really going for this, and it goes and it goes and it goes, and she melts. And then eventually there's like what appears to be some kind of raspberry or strawberry slushy moving around the ground, that I guess is a mixture of acid and blood and flesh that's following the little girl. And I think you've just watched your mum head explode from acid, and all she is worried about is, not getting it on her shoes. So she's actually quite a useless character, this girl, as is extended upon later when she becomes a bit of a problem. So, but nonetheless, great scene. And as is the way of this film, when we see excessive scenes, we then have a real calm down for what I think is one of the best scenes in the film, where Liza is talking to David Warbeck in a sort of black jazz bar. And they're not talking particularly loud, but they have no trouble hearing each other despite just being seemingly meters away from this band. And yeah, this again is the film tapping into its own absurdity rather consciously. It feels, Liza's going on about the hotel, and David Warbeck is it's unclear if he's being super skeptical, if he's open to the idea, or if he thinks that Liza's crazy. And there's just something about the way it's shot, the back and forth between them, that is just really effective. Like, especially the shots of David Warbeck, because it's so ambiguous as to what he's feeling. But again, we're building into the horror. It's quite funny how we're seeing these absurdly horrific things happen, but the film still manages to make us like follow the emotions of these main two characters who are aware that bad things are happening, but sort of not quite the extent of them. And we're like along for the ride, like we're trying to work it out with them, even though we've seen things they haven't seen. Like it's almost like two different movies are happening, but it's really effective the way they mesh those sort of clashing concepts together. Because, as I say, it's difficult to build tension when you've already revealed what's happening. But they managed to do it, and she mentions Arthur and Martha, and that they just sort of game with the hotel, and then he's like, "Funny, I've never heard of them." And as the film goes on, there's a couple more of these moments that are a bit Um, they probably take it a little bit too far, but in this moment, it's quite good. Um, so then the little girl goes to the her parents' funerals, and we get the very over the top reveal at the end of it that she's gone. Her eyes are all Emily like. Um. hmm. So we get that wonderful scene of Liza driving along that elevated stretch of road across the ocean there, and Emily just standing in the middle of the road. Um, and you know, it's interesting how when we get to the scene where Emily's going to die, that like she's like, I don't want to go back. I did what you asked. That like it's only then that maybe I'm just an idiot, but it's only then that I, as a viewer, go, oh, Emily was bad. No, that really is the the power of a pretty face, right? Because she's blonde and stuff, but we've seen her in the opening scene. We know that happened in 1927, and that this film's happening in present day, 1981, presumably. Um, and that she hasn't aged at all, and that we're seeing her now, so that she's at least, and she's speaking this ungodly way, and she is also she's just there to give ominous information. And then for some reason, it still doesn't occur to you that she's not necessarily on our side. Um. So anyway, they have a conversation, Emily and Liza, and there's this moment where like, Liza's like, now look, Emily, I've lived in New York all my life, and it's very, very funny because it's one of her worst moments accent-wise. Like, she's barely even not trying to sound British in this scene, which is just fucking great. So full respect to that. But she's talking about how she, she doesn't believe in ghosts. And look, to be honest, this is, I understand that this is a convention, probably a necessary one of horror films, where we go through the process of seeing these absurd things and our main character not believing them. But it's also like the main character is simultaneously trying to convince another character that it's true, but they themselves aren't convinced yet either. And it does build the tension, but it's a bit like, nah, like she knows that shit's going on. Anyway, a noise happens, and they say, I don't even fucking know what's going on. Or what it's in aid of, but it's a fucking great scene. So Emily very daintily runs out of the house. Like, no arms, like they're down by her side, and she's sort of tiptoeing out. And we get this great sequence of repeat, like Liza immediately remembering back to the scene, right? And we see Emily running out from different angles, and we get this almost heartbeat like audio. It's dark, and we can see fog, and you can hear crickets and stuff. And it's like, this is an excellent scene. I don't know what the fuck it's in aid of, but I don't know. Is it some kind of crossover moment or something? I can't remember what it was that caused her to run out, but she's scared. And like it's such a memorable moment. And I don't know, is it the moment that it crosses over that Schweik is officially back or something now? Because then after it, I think Liza hears more noises, and she goes upstairs and opens the door and sees Schweik there, and she's all screaming. And then, then David Warbeck appears, and you know, she takes him upstairs, and of course, we don't see Schweik. We just see the nails in the wall. And Warbeck has his smug face, says that the nails are cold, but this looks more like rust than blood. I'm like, oh, you're a fucking rust expert, are you, David? I guess he's a blood expert, being the doctor that he is. But, you know, he also hasn't heard of Emily. He hasn't heard of a lot here. But, you know, that stuff is pretty effective because, the film is with pretty simple dialogue justifying to us that, something's not right. Who are these people? I haven't heard of them. But there's the sense that the film's about to get super frustrating because it's now he hasn't believed it on a few different occasions. Well, this is the second time. And yeah. Anyway, we then eventually get a David Warbeck goes to the house that Liza has told him that Emily is. And there's this scene that's so much like the scene in Deep Red where David Hemmings goes to the haunted house and looks around forever. It's like, now it's not quite as good as it, unfortunately, but there's a similar sense of like a bit of a mess in this old house, and you can feel that it's abandoned, and then wandering around doing nothing for an excessive period of time. That sort of ponderous thing that happens. It gets cut short a little bit because he sees the Book of Ibon very quickly. Now, yeah, actually, there's a couple of things that happened before, but we'll get back to the results of the Book of Ibon. So, Martha gets, frankly, what I think she deserves. She is cleaning out this bath, and she pulls hair or something out of the plug, and it's so dirty, the water, and it drains, and then Joe the plumber's lying there, even though we know with his funeral's already happened, and she's terrified, and then he just sticks her, I think, through a nail into the back of her head, and it pushes her eyes out. That's fair enough, I think, because when his eyes came out, she didn't seem to care at all. So a bit of poetic justice there. So then there's the scene of Emily getting, speaking of things that are similar to Argento films, Emily eventually gets eaten by the dog, and unfortunately, those shots always just looks like a hand holding a dog mouth puppet, which I'm pretty sure it is, much like the scene in Suspiria. Although the rest of the scene's great, this scene's also pretty good. I'll just make quick note of the fact that when Emily's ear gets ripped off, it's very clearly already not on. But yeah, this is another one of those scenes where like things build really effectively. Emily is blind, so she can't see what we can see, which is a bunch of zombie type creatures in her house, but not attacking her. So there's a certain genius to this, because it's like she's blind, so she can't really defend herself. She can sense that something's going on. The audio in this film is in this scene is unbelievable. The music, the sort of breathing. But then they disappear, and because Dickie the dog attacks them, gets rid of them, and we think she's safe. But then, of course, the dog attacks her. So it's almost making this scene from Suspiria, making the supernatural elements of that a little bit more literal, because we can simply see them. We can see the zombies. But yeah, as I said before, within this scene, she says, "I did what I want." I was like, "Oh, sorry, I did what you wanted," and like, "Oh, so you What is it that you did exactly? As in, you knocked the guy off the scaffolding? So she's not completely innocent after all. Um, so then the movie hits a moment where it feels like it's about to get ridiculously frustrating, but it doesn't. Um, David Warbeck talks to Liza, says that he's been to the house and that it's been abandoned for 15 years. And I think this is now the third scene we've got of him sort of implicitly questioning her sanity. And it feels like it's about to really, really become frustrating, right? Because we've seen this happen. Because he then says, and I found the book that you left for me. And it's like, not only is she crazy, but he seems to be accusing her of setting everything up to try to create a story. But then he goes, "Who are you, Liza? Who are you really?" And you think, okay, is this what's going on here? We feel like he's attacking her, that he's saying that she's a liar. But then he says in the book, it says that this is one of the 7 gateways of hell. So he seems to have gone from accusing her of being a liar and this whole thing to be garbage to, but I did read the book, and if you aren't a liar, then you're probably a demon. But then he, just goes into male protecting the damsel mode. So I don't know. But it's good because it really feels like the film's about to start getting into, I don't believe you in your crazy mode that we've seen too many times, and it's boring and it's frustrating. But then, he steps up. So they go to the hospital, and this is where the zombies and stuff happen, and the stakes seem to be raised. We see Al Cliver. He's there. He gets some glass to the head. I think he gets his head removed in Demons, and he just dies fairly redundantly at the end of Zombie Flesh Eaters. So just to sort of round out the deaths that I can remember from his Fulci films. He's also in The Black Cat, come to think, but I can't remember what happens to him. That he's a cop, I think. So anyway, they go to the hospital, and this is the process that keeps happening in the movie, where they've clearly acknowledged that bad things are happening, but now they can. I think the zombies beginning to walk around, and he's all like, "No, Liza, I'm a doctor, and I'll only accept a rational explanation." To be honest, I wish the second line's still good, but I wish it wasn't there, because she's trying to say stuff, and when he says, "No, Liza, I'm a doctor," it just sounds so dismissive. He's like, no, sorry. Everything I say is more valid than what you'll say because I'm a doctor. So the rational explanation thing doesn't really need to be there, because it undermines how funny the scene potentially could have been. But anyway, still good. Just to mention, actually, there's a scene after they leave the house to go to the hospital. We see, the hotel, sorry, as in leave the hotel to go to the hospital. We see all these zombie silhouettes in the windows, and we hear the breathing noises. That's magnificent. And this is where the element of the film that we've got zombies in this because distributors wanted zombies. Okay, I take the point, I take the criticism, but you wouldn't be able to properly raise the stakes without them. And the film does this very well, because it's only at this moment that these two are finally accepting what's going on. And look, there's an argument to be made that we could be it would be better with just the random stuff happening, and then, this doesn't need to be a zombie movie. But I just think it raises the stakes. I realize that I've skipped entirely past the real estate dude getting eaten by the tarantulas. See? Um, so again, disproportionate to what he deserves. Fulci's there and locks him in because he's doing some research. So he finds the book that he's looking for. It opens up. He goes, "Oh my god!" And then lightning happens. One of the very interesting things about this film is the way there's the horrific thing is either happening or it's not happening. There's not really any in between. So the build up or the suspense is simply waiting for the terrifying thing to happen. It's not terrifying and then it is terrifying. It's not like in Halloween, say, where like we see Myers stalking for a while. It goes from guy on ladder in library, looking at some floor plans to lightning and he's on the ground and then there's tarantulas immediately. And it is a very funny scene because there's the very obviously puppet tarantulas and then there's the actual tarantulas. And again, I just like I was saying before about the whole this thing is we feel like the scene has been implied / we've seen it. He starts getting attacked and we know what's happening. These tarantulas are going to kill him, then we move on, right? We see a bit of it and then we see the rest in our imaginations. But we get to that point and then we don't see it in our imaginations, we just see it on screen. So they're like biting him and it's well into the scene that we realize he's still alive, I think. Like, I think we just sort of assume he's dead and then that they're eating him and then he seems to scream from memory. But like, again, this is one of those scenes where you just have to see it yourself. And special mention to the moment where the spider climbs in his mouth and bites into his tongue. Oh, goodness me, that's uncomfortable. But this is an unbelievably shot scene. And even with the puppet spiders, which seem to be added for humor, I mean, it just adds to it, to be honest. So anyway, back to the hospital. So Al Cliver's dead, and they've picked up the 12 to 39-year-old girl. And the thing is, we already know that she's blind, so it's not of much use to us the way the film's hiding. I think it's quite effective the way they don't seem to think that the way it avoids them checking her, like they don't realize, and she's just sort of following them around. And you can see the film avoiding us seeing her eyes, which is cool, but we already know. So, they're wandering around as the zombies are very slowly getting towards them. Again, one of Fulci's zombie-related strengths is their slow movement. I don't think it would work in more modern horror where everything needs to be faster and more exciting, or at least modern zombie stuff. But I think it's cool. I think it's really, really cool. He is getting very slowly followed by these zombies, and he's just not fucking shooting them properly. It's so frustrating because he a number of times, he's so close to them and he's just shooting them in different parts of their body and it's doing nothing, and then he shoots one of them in the head and he goes down immediately, and then he just goes back to shooting them in the body. It's like, for fuck's sake, you're actually a pretty good shot. He doesn't seem to miss with any of them. And then there's that wonderful moment where they all get into the elevator and he puts the bullet down the spout of the gun or the nozzle or whatever the fuck it's called, and you can see Catriona McCall laugh. It's so funny. It's so good. It's very subtle, but it's great. Um, so eventually, they, after following her around for a while, sorry, after following them around for a while, the girl eventually um attacks. I think she attacks Liza, and then David Warbeck blows her fucking head off, and it's it's sort of the payoff. It's like the film knows we're getting frustrated at the fact that he won't fucking shoot their heads, right? He just won't do it. Um, but of all the people who deserve to have their heads blown off, like, she wasn't even particularly attacking them. Although I think she is about to attack them in this moment. But he does not even think twice. There's not a moment of going, oh, what the fuck is that girl? No, she attacks and he shoots her. I don't know how that gun manages to blow half her head off, to be honest, given the last time that he shot somewhere in the head, it's just a little hole in their forehead. But fuck me. It's just a great moment. And then you think, what did this girl, speaking of people not doing things to deserve things, like the real estate dude. What did this girl do? All we see of her, right, is she is the daughter of the guy who gets his eyes ripped out. Then she goes in and sees her mother's head basically explode from having acid poured on it. Then she's at their funeral, and then she's in this scene. And even with all that, like the zombie people seem to just naturally attack everyone. Even with her in that state, she's not really attacking them. And then the second she does, head blown straight off. No sympathy for you, little girl, who might be 39. Great scene, though. Great practical effects. Absolutely magnificent. So then, Schweik's there for a while. His zombie version of himself, a bit boring, to be honest, not amazing. Given that he's like the thing that is, he's like the ultimate big bad of the film. The one part that the other two films do better, like with Freudstein in The House by the Cemetery, and then the priest in City of the Living Dead, there is the real sense that it's all happening because of them. Whereas this is, and we have sort of final face-offs with them, if you like. In this, not really. Like, Schweik he's there, but he's not necessarily any more terrifying than the other ones, to be honest. But that's okay. So the part that had annoyed me until I saw this again the other day was when they go from the hospital and then suddenly they go downstairs and they're in the basement of the hotel. And now don't get me wrong, the criticisms that I had for it, they're still valid. But I guess I had felt like it was reflective of a greater problem in this film where rather than, oh, it's absurd and it's surreal, it's just shit happening in silly orders. But then I thought, I think I'd sort of extrapolated that across the film and thought that happened more than it does. It's really just this moment here. And in a way, if the basement of the hotel is sort of the crux of where all of this is happening, and then you go back to this scene, like with the silhouettes, where they go from the hotel to the hospital, and they make comment on the way to the hospital. Oh, funny, there's no one around. Maybe we've actually moved into hell or into purgatory already, and they don't realize it. Maybe this is all that is happening. So the fact that it would link up, I can at least justify it. So I think when they go down into the basement, there's that music that it's sort of it's very but it's a sort of underwater sounding type music. I think it's lifted directly from Zombie Flesh Eaters, from the scene where maybe they're in the that sort of barn looking hospital, and a couple of the zombies rise, or like a couple of the people that were characters rise. I think it's from that moment, but it's really good. Um, and then fuck me, what about the end? What about the fucking end? This is one of the greatest scenes from a horror movie of all time. It is just incredible. And again, where I think I had been critical of it in the past was I felt like this film didn't exactly earn this scene. Um, but I think it does well enough. But regardless, it's an unbelievable scene. You know, we get the revelation that now in the basement it looks exactly like Spike's picture, and there's people lying down, and it's really good because of the way it's lit and the fog and all that. It doesn't, like, you can half tell it's a set and half think it might be this endless landscape. And the music's all and because of the music, right? It's not clear, and this is a big statement. It's not clear if this is actually a happy ending because they go for a little jog. Sorry, they're looking around and they're terrified. And we see behind them, we see the front of them, and they look genuinely terrified. It's a great scene. And then they go for a little jog, holding hands, clearly to run to where the camera is, so they can open their eyes and show us that now they're blind. But it's like the music. Right, it's clearly not a happy ending, right? They're in this purgatory and it's horrible. But there's a sense like they look back at one point and seem to think, no, we shouldn't go back because it's awful up there. There's all those zombies. And then they look forward and then they look back again and the stairs are gone. And it's like, well, is purgatory better than what was up there? I think that's the insinuation. But it's so beautiful, this scene. Like, the music is just stunning. It really is a beautiful, beautiful scene. And then they disappear, which looks a bit silly. There's no need for it. And then there's that quote, and you will face the sea of darkness and all therein that may be explored. Now, I don't know. In my head, I feel like that's probably a direct Lovecraft quote. I must say I don't think I've actually said the word Lovecraft in these entire two podcasts. Not that these films aren't extremely Lovecraftian, but that I'm not a big enough of a Lovecraft scholar or expert to speak on that. So apologies for that. So yeah, made this little note that maybe Fulci is suggesting that hell has come to Earth and that it wouldn't be any worse than here. Watch it, because these moments, the scent is so good, the cinematography, the fucking music, the effective use of slow motion, the even rather humorous way that David Warwick is just looking terrified when he's blind. He's like, ah, like it just looks, it genuinely looks like he's going, ah. This look, I'm not really in the habit of recommending films or not, but this one you actually should watch. And it's a particular note. I was watching some YouTube videos about it in preparation, and people were saying, I showed it to my friend and they hated it. They're an American horror fan, or I hated it the first time I watched it. Now, as in they were saying that. It took me a while on these to really, really like them, or this specifically to really, really like it. But once you get your head around it, you get your head around the type of film that it is, and that it isn't sort of, killer stalking people type thing, and it isn't exactly monster movie either. There's a certain aesthetic, but of that aesthetic, the beyond is the ultimate, the cosmic horror. Another term that I haven't used enough or at all. If you're going to watch only one from the Gates of Hell trilogy, it should be this. And if you want to understand uh, the heights that Fulci could get to when he was being excessive, when he was more in the mode of let's give the audience what they want, this is the perfect one of his films. Thanks very much for joining me. Join me next month again for the concluding discussion in the Gates of Hell trilogy, the House by the Cemetery. This has been my discussion of Lucio Fulci's 1981 classic, The Beyond. I'm the Italian Horror Guy, and this has been the Italian Horror Guy podcast.